When a rich girl loved a poor boy, it ended in blood. Late summer air clung to the skin like a whisper you couldn't shake, and the town of Eldridge Falls, quaint, nestled in a cradle of wooded hills and quiet judgment, was holding its breath. At the top of the hill stood the Carrington estate, a symbol of old money and quiet power. Inside its grand halls lived Isabella Carrington, a girl whose life looked like something out of a fashion magazine. Wealth, beauty, status. But if you looked closer, behind the polished doors and imported chandeliers, you'd see the cracks in the porcelain. And down in the valley, where the dirt road still remembered the weight of horseshoes and broken promises, lived Eli Mercer, a boy born to a ghost of a mother and an absent father, raised in a leaning house by his grandmother, with hands calloused from labor and a heart too big for his own good. Their story should have been a love letter written in the margins of a worn notebook. Instead, it was scrawled in blood. The first time Isabella saw Eli, he was sitting on the edge of a collapsed bridge, legs swinging over the side, his fingers sketching something into the dirt. She had snuck away from the annual Carrington Summer Gala, another suffocating affair filled with adults who reeked of money and hidden affairs, and wandered down the road she'd always been warned not to. Her dress snagged on briars, her heels were ruined. But there he was, like a painting no one was meant to see. Wild curls, a worn flannel shirt, eyes that didn't belong in this town. They held stories, not just glances. "Why are you drawing in dirt?" she asked, half laughing. Eli looked up, squinting. "Why are you dressed like you belong in a glass box?" She smiled. He didn't. They talked for an hour. Then 2. She didn't tell him her last name. He didn't ask. When the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the world gold, Isabella left him with only a glance back. She felt something stir in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Wonder. She came back the next day. And the next. Over the following weeks, their meetings became a ritual. He showed her the hidden trails and the places where the creek water ran clear and cold. She read to him beneath the sycamore tree in the old field, brought him books from her father's library, food from her mother's untouched kitchen. They didn't talk about money or last names. Only music. Dreams. The stars. But Eldridge Falls was not a place for secrets to stay buried. One evening, as Eli walked her back toward the outskirts of the estate, someone saw them. Someone with a long memory and a longer grudge. Martha Langley, the town florist, had once been a maid in the Carrington house before her dismissal under vague but whispered circumstances. The next morning, whispers bloomed like weeds. Isabella was summoned to her father's study. Ambrose Carrington sat in a leather chair that looked more like a throne, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. "Do you know what people are saying?" he asked coldly. She didn't respond. "I allowed you freedom. I gave you space to find yourself. But you will not destroy this family's reputation over some valley rat." Her hands curled into fists. "He's kind," she said softly. Her father laughed without warmth. "Kind doesn't matter. Kind doesn't build empires." Her mother stood nearby, a porcelain ghost, silent as always. "I'm not asking you," Ambrose said. "I'm telling you. End it. Or I will." That night, Isabella didn't go to the field. She stayed in her room, tears soaking the silk of her pillowcase. But Eli did. He waited beneath the sycamore tree, watched the moon rise high, then sink low, and finally walked home, something hollow forming in his chest. The next night, she came. Eyes swollen, voice shaking. "I can't stop seeing you," she whispered. "Then don't," he replied. They kissed beneath the old tree, and for a moment, the world made sense. But Eldridge Falls never forgets. The Carringtons had controlled the town for generations. The Mercers. They had always been a stain on its story. Soon, Eli was followed. Watched. His shifts at the diner grew shorter. Tips disappeared. Old friends stopped returning calls. Someone keyed his truck, then slashed the tires. His grandmother, Maybelle, tried to warn him. "Boy, love don't mean nothin' in a place like this. The rich don't mix with the likes of us without something breaking." But he didn't listen. Because when Isabella looked at him, he saw something pure. And she, desperate to escape her gilded cage, clung to him like a lifeline. They made plans. They would leave. Run away to the city, maybe New Orleans. Start over. She had money tucked away. He had grit. But escape from Eldridge Falls wasn't so easy. There are nights when a town like Eldridge Falls seems to shift, to breathe with something older than time. And on the night of the blood moon, the air grew thick. Something crept into the wind. That evening, Isabella met Eli by the creek. They talked about their escape, just 4 days away. "I can't wait to never see this place again," she whispered. But someone else was watching. Across the water, behind the cover of trees, eyes glinted in the darkness. That was the last time anyone saw them together and alive. By morning, Isabella would return to a house filled with silence. And Eli? Well, Eli would vanish without a trace. But the blood, oh, the blood would come later. And it would stain the soil of Eldridge Falls forever. This was only the beginning. People always say love is blind. But in Eldridge Falls, love didn't just blind, it bled. And by the time the truth surfaced, it was already too late to wash the stains away. After the night of the blood moon, Isabella Carrington returned home under a sky so dark it looked bruised. Her dress was damp from creek water, her lips still tingling from Eli's kiss. Hope clung to her like morning dew. But hope, like innocence, is fragile. And by the time the sun rose, that hope was gone, along with Eli Mercer. Isabella woke to chaos. The first thing she heard was the shriek of the housekeeper downstairs, followed by the slam of her father's voice echoing through the marble halls. Then came the knock at her door, hard, demanding. "Miss Carrington, you need to come down. Now." She barely had time to tie her robe before she was ushered into the drawing room. Her father was pacing, jaw clenched. Her mother sat in a high-backed chair, knuckles white around a teacup that hadn't been sipped. Sheriff Collins stood by the fireplace, hat in hand, a clipboard tucked under one arm. "Isabella," he said, eyes grave, "when was the last time you saw Eli Mercer?" Her blood ran cold. "Last night," she said, voice thin. "At the creek." "Did he seem upset? Distraught? Talk about harming himself?" "No," her eyes widened. "No, he was fine. He was happy. We were making plans." "Plans?" She hesitated. Her father's eyes bore into her. "To leave." A pause. Collins sighed and flipped a page. "His grandmother called this morning. Said he never came home last night. She thought maybe he stayed with friends, but no one's seen him." Isabella's heart dropped. "He wouldn't just disappear. We found his truck," the sheriff added, "abandoned near the old sawmill. The keys were still in the ignition." Her father scoffed. "Of course they were. He's running. Or playing some foolish game to pull Isabella further into his mess." Isabella stood frozen. Her nails bit into her palms. Eli was gone. And something in her gut whispered that this wasn't just a disappearance. This was a warning. That night, while the Carrington estate fell into a restless hush, Isabella crept into her room and locked the door. She opened her phone. No texts. No calls. Nothing from Eli. Then she noticed the envelope on her desk. No stamp. No name. Just one word in trembling ink. "Izzy." Her heart raced. She tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, torn at the edges. "I don't know who I can trust anymore. Something's not right. I see people watching me, faces I recognize but shouldn't be out at night. I think they know about us. I think they're going to do something. If I disappear, it's not by choice. Remember the sycamore tree. Follow the roots." No signature. But she didn't need one. She clutched the note to her chest, heart hammering. Eli hadn't left. Eli had been taken. The next morning, Isabella skipped breakfast. She told her father she had a headache. By 10 a.m. she was gone, slipping out through the kitchen door, across the lawn, through the woods, until the familiar shape of the sycamore tree rose before her like a monument. She dropped to her knees at the base. "Follow the roots," she whispered. She scraped away the soft earth. Dirt clung to her nails, her palms. After 10 minutes, her fingers struck something solid, wood. A small tin box. Inside, a flash drive. A bundle of cash. And 3 photographs. She stared at them. The first was of Eli, smiling, shirt dusted with flour, probably during his shift at the diner. The second was of her and Eli together, taken from a distance, through leaves. And the third made her breath catch. It was a picture of her father, at the edge of the woods, talking to 2 men she didn't recognize. One of them held a shovel. She went straight to the valley, box hidden in her satchel. Maybelle Mercer answered the door, her face pale and drawn. "I knew you'd come," the old woman rasped. "Come in, child." Inside, the air smelled of old cloth and lemon polish. Maybelle led her to the kitchen table and poured sweet tea into chipped glasses. "He told me you were planning to leave. I warned him. Told him no Carrington ever let go of their secrets easy." Isabella pulled out the box and set it on the table. Maybelle didn't flinch. "I told him to keep records. Said if anything ever happened, he needed insurance. He dug into things. Your family's name. It's built on more than land and money." "What do you mean?" Isabella whispered. Maybelle looked her dead in the eyes. "I mean blood, girl. Old blood. Cover-ups. Payoffs. Your grandfather bought silence like other men bought whiskey. And your father, he learned to buy fear." "Are you saying my father?" "I'm saying people like him don't like dirt touching their silk. And Eli was dirt in his eyes." Isabella shook her head, fighting the rising nausea. "I need to find him," she said. "He's still alive. I can feel it." Maybelle reached across the table, laid a bony hand on hers. "Then you better move fast. 'Cause if he ain't dead yet, he will be soon." She didn't sleep that night. She watched the flash drive on an old laptop in her closet, hidden under a blanket. Footage. Grainy and shaky, but clear enough. Hidden cameras Eli had placed near the estate. Clips of unfamiliar cars pulling into the woods late at night. Men carrying sacks. Tools. Shovels. One clip made her cry out. Her father. Standing in the darkness. Handing a man a thick envelope. And another voice. Faint but audible. "Dig deep. No one finds him." She covered her mouth to stop the scream. Eli had been buried alive. At dawn, Isabella stood before the sycamore again, eyes bloodshot, resolve like steel. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about truth. About breaking the bones of a legacy built on silence. She was going to find him. Even if it meant tearing down her own bloodline to do it. The Carringtons had taken everything from her. Now she would take something back. And if there was still time, she would bring Eli home. Love had drawn her into the forest. But revenge. Revenge was leading her deeper into its roots. Isabella Carrington wasn't a girl anymore. Not after what she'd seen. Not after discovering the truth behind the velvet curtains of her family legacy. Somewhere beneath the soil of Eldridge Falls, Eli Mercer was buried, alive or dead, she didn't know. But one thing was certain. If her father had put him underground, she would be the one to dig him out. The Carrington estate had always felt like a museum. Hollow, cold, preserved. But now, with her father's secrets in hand, Isabella began to see it differently. The floorboards creaked in patterns. Doors didn't just close. They listened. The portraits of her ancestors watched her, not with pride, but warning. She needed answers. Not suspicion, not whispered theories, but proof. She remembered the old wine cellar, long abandoned, tucked behind a locked door in the eastern wing. Her grandfather used to vanish there for hours. The key had been lost for years. Or so they claimed. She slipped into her father's study while he was away at the country club. The drawer beneath the bourbon bottles was locked, but she'd learned to pick locks during one of many adventurous phases her parents had written off as rebellion. Click. The key was brass, cold, and labeled only with a number, 13. That night, under the glow of a single flashlight, she crept down the eastern wing's hallway. Door 13. The key slid in like it belonged. The hinges groaned as the door opened to reveal a stone stairwell winding into darkness. She descended slowly, one hand on the wall, the other clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The air was thick, old earth, mildew, and something else. Rot. The cellar wasn't just a place for wine. Old crates stacked with newspaper clippings, ledgers, and photographs lined the walls. There were maps of the property with markings, red XS in remote corners of the estate, and a table in the center of the room. Rusted chains bolted into its sides. Her breath hitched. It was a holding place. For what? A movement in the corner of the room made her freeze. A camera, pointed directly at the table. She approached it, heart hammering, and found a stack of SD cards beside it, each labeled by date. Some went back decades. She stuffed as many as she could into her backpack. Then she saw it, on the far wall. A large sheet of paper pinned with red string and photos. Her father's face was at the center. But so were others. Town officials, the sheriff, the former mayor, and Eli. His photo had a red circle around it. Next to it, asset or liability. Her knees buckled. She staggered back up the stairs, eyes stinging with tears. This wasn't just a cover-up. It was a system. Back at the house, Isabella reviewed the SD cards. Most were surveillance footage, interrogations, threats, some even beatings. Always in the same room. Always conducted by men in suits with voices like smoke and knives. But one clip. One changed everything. It was dated 2 nights ago. The footage showed Eli, alive, bound, bruised, but defiant. He was strapped to the cellar table. Her father leaned over him. "You should have stayed where you belong," Ambrose growled. Eli spat blood. "She deserves to know who you are." Ambrose struck him. Then the camera turned off. The timestamp ended. Eli hadn't been moved far. He was still on the estate. The next morning, Isabella made her move. She waited until her parents were at brunch, then slipped down to the cellar with bolt cutters and a crowbar. But when she reached the chamber, the table was empty. Fresh chains. No blood. They'd moved him again. She scanned the maps on the wall, eyes darting. One particular X pulsed in her vision. The old gardener's shed. On the north edge of the property. Long abandoned. Or so she thought. The shed had once been used to store soil and pesticides. Now, its door was reinforced with a modern padlock. She broke it with the crowbar. Inside was darkness, until her flashlight flickered across the floor, revealing a trapdoor. She pried it open. Below, another ladder. Another descent. But this one reeked of urine, sweat, and suffering. As she climbed down, the walls closed in, stone and damp, until she reached the floor, a crude cell, carved into earth and rock. She called out, "Eli." Silence. Then a sound, soft, rasping. "Izzy." She dropped the light. It clattered, rolled, and illuminated him. Eli. Bound, bloodied, but alive. She ran to him, weeping. "I'm getting you out. Right now." But Eli's eyes widened. "No. Wait. There's something." The trapdoor slammed above them. Heavy boots. A click of metal. Locked in. Together. A voice drifted down the ladder. Her father. "Sweetheart," he called, calm and composed. "I had hoped it wouldn't come to this." Isabella's hands trembled as she tried to break the lock on Eli's chains. "You're a liar," she screamed. "You tortured him. I protected you. Ambrose replied. Do you have any idea what he was doing? What he found? She paused. He was planning to expose everything. The accounts. The properties. Even the bodies. Bodies. Oh yes, he said. Did you think the Carrington fortune came from banking? No. We insured loyalty with blood. Control with fear. Eli groaned. You're insane. No, Ambrose said. I'm a Carrington. And Isabella, so are you. I'd rather die than become like you, she spat. Silence. Then, that can be arranged. Footsteps retreated. She turned to Eli, frantic. We'll get out. I swear. But the walls felt tighter now. The air thinner. Above, she heard the sound of gasoline sloshing. And the scratch of a match. In the pitch dark of that underground room, as smoke began to curl through the floorboards, Isabella Carrington made a choice. She would not die in her father's house. She would not let the sins of the Carringtons bury another person alive. And even if she had to burn everything down to escape, she would make sure her father burned with it. The Carrington name had once meant elegance, power, legacy. Now it meant lies, torture, and possibly murder. Deep beneath the gardener's shed, Isabella and Eli sat in darkness, chained, bruised, and surrounded by the smell of gasoline. Her father's footsteps were gone. But the fire hadn't started yet. And as she clutched Eli's trembling hand, Isabella knew this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a reckoning. The trapdoor above them creaked. Smoke trickled in through the slats. The room was still dry, but not for long. Help me, Isabella said, frantic. Eli's wrists were raw from struggling. The iron shackles were rusted but thick. She fumbled through her backpack, fingers closing around the one tool she still had, the bolt cutters. She'd used them once to break into the wine cellar. Now, they were their only chance of escape. The first chain snapped after several grueling tries, but the second took longer. Eli bit down on his own jacket to muffle his cries. Every movement sent waves of pain through his ribs. When the last chain fell free, he collapsed into her arms. Above them, the air hissed, then crackled. A flicker of orange light burst through the gaps above. The match had been struck. Time's up, she whispered. We need another way out. They scanned the earthen walls, flashlight flickering, sweat dripping. Eli's voice was barely audible. Back wall. Used to be a drainage tunnel. She pressed her hands against the wall and felt it. Soft soil behind loose brick. She slammed the crowbar into it again and again. The bricks gave way. A tunnel, tight and low, revealed itself behind the rubble. Pitch black. No time for fear. She pushed Eli in first and crawled behind, smoke trailing them like a shadow. They didn't look back. Not even when the trapdoor blew open behind them with a roaring whoosh and the flames swallowed the prison that had almost become their grave. The tunnel was a relic, probably built decades ago when the estate had underground irrigation. It smelled of rot and age. Bats clung to the stone ceiling. Spiders the size of coins skittered past their hands. But it was freedom. Every inch forward was a rebellion against the Carrington curse. Izzy, Eli said, coughing. If we get out, promise me you'll go. Leave this place. No, she said without hesitating. We end it together. Eventually, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, an old root cellar behind the north orchard. The exit door had rotted off its hinges. They emerged into daylight. But it didn't feel like safety. Because standing 20 feet away at the edge of the trees was a figure. Sheriff Collins. His pistol was already drawn. You should have stayed put, he said coldly. Eli instinctively moved in front of Isabella. Collins stepped closer, eyes unreadable. Ambrose called me. Said there was a fire. Said you two started it. You know the truth, Isabella said. You've always known. The sheriff looked tired, older than he had hours ago. I know what happens when people cross the Carringtons. I've buried more secrets for that family than I can count. Then help us, Eli said. Please. Just this once. Collins didn't lower the gun. Then his hand began to shake. I have a daughter your age, he murmured. She wanted to go to college in Chicago. Ambrose paid for her tuition. Said it was a gift. But there are no gifts. Only debts. He looked between them, at Isabella's torn clothes, Eli's bruised face. Run, he said. What? Before I change my mind. Go. They didn't wait to be told twice. They ran. They didn't go far. Not yet. Not until they had what they needed. Back at Maybelle Mercer's cottage, Isabella and Eli collapsed onto her porch. Maybelle gasped at the sight of them. Good God, you look like you crawled out of hell. We almost didn't crawl out at all, Eli muttered. Inside, with warm towels and black coffee, they explained everything. About the fire, the cellar, the tunnel, the sheriff. Maybelle opened a dusty cabinet and handed Isabella something. A key. To the town records, she said. Your grandfather locked them away in the church vault before he died. Thought nobody'd ever come asking. What's in them? Isabella asked. Maybelle's voice dropped. Proof. Names. Transactions. Dates. Everything your family's ever buried. If you want to take the Carringtons down, that's where you start. At midnight, they slipped into the old stone church under cover of fog. The caretaker's quarters were empty. He'd been bought off years ago. The key fit perfectly into the trapdoor behind the altar. Inside, dust, old pews, forgotten relics, and a steel file cabinet, thick with records. Isabella flipped through folders, eyes widening. Land acquisitions soaked in bribes. Insurance fraud disguised as philanthropy. And then, the photos. Some matched the ones Eli had taken. Others were worse. Images of graves in the woods. Names that had gone missing over decades. All poor. All expendable. And at the heart of it all, every transaction signed in the same looping script. Ambrose Carrington. She snapped photos of everything. Then she found the final file. Project Legacy. Carrington Inheritance. Inside, a notarized document. Ambrose had left everything to her. Not his wife. Not his partners. Her. It was a death sentence wrapped in a blood-stained bow. Because if he died, and the truth came out, Isabella would be the next Carrington to cover it all up. Unless she burned it down herself. Outside the church, the wind howled. Eli stood beside her, battered but alive, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen in days. Hope. We have everything, he whispered. Let's take it public. Isabella stared down at the files in her hands. No, she said. Not yet. He frowned. What are you thinking? She looked toward the estate, where the smoke still curled into the sky. I'm thinking it's time to pay my father a visit. The Carrington legacy was built on lies, buried bodies, and blood-soaked money. But now it was crumbling, and Isabella Carrington was holding the match. Armed with damning evidence, side by side with the boy they tried to erase, she was no longer running. No longer hiding. She was going back to where it all started. Home. To end it in fire, confession, or death. They approached the Carrington estate just before dawn. The once pristine white mansion was now marred with soot and smoke stains. The eastern wing had been sealed off by fire crews, but the rest of the house stood like a monument to decay. Eli parked the car just off the main drive. You don't have to do this, he told her. Isabella turned, eyes hollow but burning. I was born in this house. It took everything from you. It's time it took something back. They entered through the kitchen door, long forgotten by staff and too pedestrian for Ambrose's liking. The house was eerily quiet. But she knew he'd be waiting. She could feel it, like a storm holding its breath. They found him in the parlor, sitting beneath the enormous oil painting of his grandfather, the original Carrington patriarch. Ambrose looked calm. He sipped whiskey like it was just another morning. "You survived," he said, not even looking up. "I'm not here to play games," Isabella said. "Neither am I." He finally turned to face her. The years had caught up to him overnight. His face was gray, eyes rimmed with red. A man beginning to unravel, but still clinging to control. "I suppose you think you've uncovered something damning. You want to ruin me?" he asked. "I want the truth." Ambrose stood and approached slowly. "The truth," he said softly, "is that you were never supposed to love him. You were born to uphold something bigger. A legacy. And you were going to throw it away for him." Eli stepped forward, fists clenched. "I loved her. I still do." Ambrose laughed. "A poor boy's love. How quaint." He turned back to Isabella. "You don't understand what it takes to hold power. To maintain it. To protect a name like Carrington." "I understand now," she said coldly. "You murdered for it. You buried people alive for it. And I would again," he hissed. "Because power is survival. Without it, we're just." He stopped. Then smiled. "Too late anyway. You see, I sent the footage to my contacts. Every video you stole. Every document. They're all gone." Isabella didn't flinch. "Wrong." She reached into her coat and pulled out a flash drive. Multiple copies. Cloud storage. Public server. Auto-release timer. If anything happens to me or Eli, it all goes live. For the first time, Ambrose looked unsure. "That's bluff." "It's not," she said. "You taught me to play chess, father. You should have known I'd learn the endgame." Ambrose moved suddenly. Too fast. From his coat pocket, a pistol appeared. He aimed it at Eli. "I warned you," he said. "But you wouldn't listen." Isabella screamed. But Eli didn't move. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," he said. A pause. Then, bang. The shot rang out like thunder in a coffin. Eli staggered. Blood bloomed across his side. Isabella screamed again, catching him before he fell completely. Ambrose raised the gun again. "Last chance," he said. "Delete the files. Destroy the drive." But Isabella's hands were already moving. Faster than he expected. She reached into the side drawer of the desk, the one where she'd found the old ledger days ago. She pulled out her grandfather's pistol. One shot. Straight to Ambrose's chest. He fell backwards, eyes wide. No words. Just a gurgling gasp. And silence. The sun was rising when the first sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff Collins kept his word. Isabella sat on the steps of the mansion, Eli beside her, bleeding but alive. The drive was already uploading. Every file, every photo, every record. Straight to news outlets. To federal agencies. To the world. The Carrington name would never be clean again. "Do you regret it?" Eli asked, voice weak. "No," she said, brushing blood from his cheek. "Not for a second. Even though it ended like this?" She looked out at the burning remnants of her past. "It didn't end like this," she whispered. "It began." The Carrington estate had been seized by the state. The house was gutted. The land auctioned. The accounts frozen. Trials had followed. Long, vicious, scandalous. Names fell like dominoes. Politicians. Businessmen. Judges. Isabella testified at every one. She wore no makeup. No jewelry. Just black. And when it was over, she disappeared from public life. People speculated. But they didn't know. Because far from the city, nestled in a quiet forest 2 states away, there stood a small, modest home. Inside, Isabella Carrington, now just Izzy, sat on a porch swing, reading. Eli came out, limping from a still-healing leg, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "For the first time in my life." They sat in silence, watching the trees sway. No screaming. No gunshots. No shadows lurking behind oil paintings. Just wind, birds, and freedom. They said love between a rich girl and a poor boy would never last. They were right. Because what lasted was something stronger than love. It was survival. It was truth. It was blood. But not the kind her father spilled. The kind that burns through generations and plants something new in the ash. And somewhere in the silence, a legacy was reborn.